Hello, everybody. So the panel that we have today is about entrepreneurship in India. How is it different? As we have all seen that India has progressed a lot in the last few years, and it's going to progress even faster in the years to come. And many of us over here want to go back to India and start a new venture. But in order to do that, we first have to understand the risks and the challenges that everyone are facing in India in terms of entrepreneurship. So to do that, we have a great panel over here who's going to talk about entrepreneurship in India and how is it different over there. So the moderator of our panel today is Dinesh Katiyar. So I'll invite him to start the panel and introduce the other panelists over here. Thank you.
All right. You can all hear us? So, we're actually just going to jump into it. You can read about all of the panelists if you haven't already. But yeah, we're just going to try and maximize discussion time.
We need everyone to please move towards halls D, A1, A3, and J. Lunch buffets are now closed, and we would really, really like you all to make your way to one of these wonderful panels, and the panelists that are ready to charm. Please make your way to the hall, to the panel rooms and hall D.
All right. Hopefully you all ate. Food is closed. So, about a year and a half ago, I think a lot of us started wondering why a bunch of Indian publications were making the same mistake. They were all reporting funding rounds with an extra zero in them. And of course, slowly we realized that it actually wasn't a typo. So, if you haven't been holed up in a locked cabin the last year, you know something's afoot. Entrepreneurial activity in India is at absolute historic highs. Funding levels are, as you can see, have picked up again at their sort of historic highs. The fantastic thing about today's panel is that none of these started their entrepreneurial journey in the last 2 years. They've actually been at this for many years. They have perspectives that come from building companies, investing in companies over several years. As we'll discover, they have experiences from multiple geographies. So we're, hopefully we'll glean some advice as we chat with them. I'm going to jump in very quickly. First, I'm going to ask all the panelists. So, is this really the golden age, or are we in bubble territory? What's the high-level take?
I'll start.
Yes.
So, at very high level, India is an opportunity which is happening as we speak right now. From mobile phone, if you look at the mobile phone, which has become actually a backbone for whatever the country will be doing. So we have close to 150 million devices which are connecting to internet right now. And this number is going to 500 million in actually next 3 to 4 years. And it's going to be creating a massive opportunity when it comes to all kind of digital services, commerce, social services, education, healthcare. And I believe this is a time for India.
So just to build on what Amit mentioned, there is another very interesting dynamic, which is that if you look at India as a market, it is relatively a small market. So it is growth driven. And if you look at the newest generation, its alignment with the digital assets is also the highest. So one interesting driver of the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem that you're seeing is you really do not need middle-aged people to change their mindset to be relevant for the companies that are getting built right now, which is a really serious boon because there is no mindset change involved. Somebody who's coming fresh out of school can as easily attack the kinds of companies that need to be created today. And if that match were not there, you would find lower entrepreneurial activity. So from the last 15, 16 years that I've been seeing it, this whole conjunction of having untainted people with cynicism associated with doing business and not working out or having to bribe, blah, 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 is not needed. The mindset in any case that is needed is the right one. It also came at a very interesting time where the returns in the rest of the world are sucking wind. So capital also finds its way to a place where at least the growth prospects are interesting. So I guess I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. So let's see how far it goes.
Great. So I certainly think that in the last 15 years since I've been an entrepreneur, the amount of enthusiasm in the rest of the ecosystem has been tremendous. But what we mostly hear about, I think one is a lot of the e-commerce system, e-commerce activity. But there is also, the good thing now is that there's a lot of other deep product expertise also that is coming up in small pockets. And I think that is very exciting. I think the fact that even healthcare, genomics and all have also been on the high, I think obviously is something that signals the start of something good, but there are certain segments that obviously have been ignored as well.
Yeah, I think it is definitely the golden age because for the last many years, it's been about taking models which have succeeded in other parts of the world, like taking QuickBooks to India and making it like an India version of QuickBooks, or taking the Amazon to India and so on. But I think in the last couple of years, there's a lot of localized as well as global product development for products or services which don't exist anywhere else. Right? So it's fundamental innovation that's happening in India over the last couple of years. So that's very encouraging to me.
All right. So nobody's being controversial here. I guess no bubble at all. So.
So bubble is a different topic.
All right. So let's jump into some of the more operational things that a lot of you have had to deal with. So Anu, I'll start with you, and then maybe Amit, you can chime in on this. But what do you think are some of the unique challenges that entrepreneurs face in India that might be somewhat different from say the Valley?
So one of the bigger, the challenges that entrepreneurs face in the US is that you do spend a lot of time trying to figure out the system as it is. Now, a lot of times, if you are just doing a mobile app, or if you're in the software space, you are likely to not come across a lot of those those issues, whether it's dealing with customs, excise, and various other such things when you have to import and export things across. That's definitely one thing. The second is that if you're trying to build a very deep domain expertise in a certain area, the lack of finding the right team becomes a challenge in India, which even though it will be there in the West, it is even harder to find in India. There are many other challenges which I think one more we can go to is to be able to say you might suddenly come across things that would be like a retroactive law that would be passed, right? And I think unless you are built with the right kind of perseverance and the way to deal with the system, which can be in multiple ways, whether you heat the system up or you beat the system or you make somebody eat, then I think you are less likely to be able to succeed in India. So there's a lot of things that you have to start balancing to be able to be completely successful in India.
All right. Amit, any experiences from
So when we started InMobi back in 2006, a lot of things were not there in terms of angel investments were not unheard of. In fact, InMobi was one of the first investment from Mumbai Angel, which is a prominent angel group in the country. There was nothing called cloud. If you have to put up something, you have to figure out data centers, figure out many other things. Certainly there was nothing called, for that matter, mobile internet ecosystem. And if I compare right now versus what environment we basically got to when we started the company, I think things have changed pretty good. Although the question is, what are still some of the challenges, unique challenges which we face if we start a company in India? I would say India has got a very, very good talent pool when it comes to engineering, people writing amazing piece of code, etc. But when it comes to some of the software part, which is design and UX skills, the marketing skills, and the product management skills, and that's where probably we need to groom more talent. And if you are trying to build a good consumer first product, you need to be really, really good in creating those experiences which are world class, which are easy to use. And I would still basically say that if you ask me where we face crunch, difficulty is getting the right set of people for these talents. One more other point which I would like to bring, which is a little bit philosophical. It's actually about the mindset of that, hey, can we build something big, global, sustainable business out of India? And that mindset actually was missing. It was in the, maybe, we used to see role models in the form of Narayan Murthy, Ambanis and Tatas and Birlas. But for some reason, this whole technology thing, it was not happening. And again, I'm so happy that now at least a lot of entrepreneurs can look up to at least 10 companies who have built something of scale and get inspiration and to do something really meaningful. So things have changed, but I'm saying we are a billion plus people. A lot of such stories should be coming out, and it should be a huge change from there after that.
Amit, maybe we'll just stay with you and then work our way back. But we're seeing companies do a good job of building their early core teams now a lot easier than perhaps even 3-4 years ago. But then sort of scaling up, as you move into tens of employees, hundreds of employees, what are your observations? What are things that perhaps work and some things that don't?
Sure. So again, going back on InMobi experience, for us, as I was telling you that even right now when we are having a crunch of good marketing UX people, back then 8 years ago it was worse. So for us, the route was really to attract people from the US and convince them that, hey, India's story will happen. Imagine back then there was no other example. And there were few folks who were crazy, who thought that, okay, probably what these guys are saying is correct. And we basically got them moved to India. And then we were able to groom people. And luckily, we also had companies like Yahoo, Google, who had offices in India, in Bangalore. Even they had some good talent. Again, some of folks moved back from Valley. Some of them they groomed internally. And we happened to actually got some of the folks early in the game. And that was the important point where we basically took an approach of hiring what we call them as surgeons, which are experts in their field, and also grooming what we call as athlete, the people, the folks who are fundamentally smart and passionate, get them on board, put them on product management, put them on marketing, put them on anything, they will figure it out. So that's how we basically bridge the talent gap back then, and even right now for us, when we hire someone, so we look at attitude and passion to be the number one thing, followed by the smarts, and the skill set comes the last. So if someone who is an engineer wants to do sales, no problem. Come InMobi is basically a place where if you are passionate about something and have willingness to and capability to learn, we'll figure out the skill set part. So it has been a company DNA from the beginning.
Right. Ashish, anything you've noticed across your portfolio companies in terms of how they've scaled?
So I think there is fully echo the kinds of things that Amit was mentioning, that you have to grow your own talent by and large. One other area where the growth needs to happen is really also attitude. And the kind of attitude, especially, so for example, I was here for 16, 17 years before I moved back to India. And it took a little getting used to, and this is after I had also run a services company based out of Bangalore. So it's not like it was purely virgin territory. Still, there was a bit of a shock associated with certain attitudinal aspects, which, by the way, so one precursor to these remarks, everything is changing so quickly, by the way, that literally every year the comments that you hear are largely invalid compared to the prior year. And I don't know if you all would agree. And that is practically on every dimension. And this is another one where the second derivative is also a nice positive number, not just the first derivative. So that attitudinal piece, coming back to it, was lack of sufficient attention or pride in a good finish, looking at things as a task as opposed to as a solution to a problem. That was one piece which in particular gets in the way of the middle management piece, because a lot of the middle managers that several of our companies today end up getting are transplants from some other company, because not every engineer grows up to become a good manager. And one has to induct them into a slightly different culture than what you manage to induct into the more junior members of the team which is what most people end up starting out with to begin with. So in addition to growing your talent, you have to do this attitude surgery with some of the lateral hires that come in from the outside. And I think the other piece from the perspective of paucity of growing these talents, which is a dynamic, the better people all want to become entrepreneurs. So you've got, which is wonderful, except some of them, unfortunately, their companies will have to fold up, and then you get entrepreneurially inclined people who are willing to become middle managers, as opposed to middle management inclined people being middle managers, so to speak. So that is going to be another dynamic, and we'll see how that plays out.
I'll actually add one point to Ashish's point. 75% of the people in the top 100 attrition bucket, we lose to entrepreneurship. InMobi has got 50 startups coming from InMobi alumni. So very, very valid point.
So I think for us, we've always been a very deep domain, like we needed genomics people. And the first time when we started 15 years ago, we needed bioinformatics people. And I think that was very, very difficult to attain. So the first 2,000 resumes that came in, and we were looking for a bioinformatics analyst, there was one resume that said bioinformatics blast. We got so excited, yay, we got somebody who actually has some expertise. But the way we solved this was saying, if you're not going to be able to get expertise in India, can we get people from outside who are willing to come back? And so luckily, we used our network of friends and LinkedIn and various other means to get people who had moved back, some people who were in a lab where one of my co-founders in the US was, and so on. So we built a little bit of the team from the lab perspective. But there was also a problem of saying, how do we really scale this up? Because you can't get bioinformaticians that easily. But we'd have to start building these products up over there. And so we decided to work with a university in Michigan at that time. And we basically offered a certificate course. And since we were a small company, we also needed to make some money out of it. So we started offering this to people outside. But that became a lot of our core team members in over a period of time. Later on, we used that as, we call it vertical integration when we were pitching to investors. But I think the good thing now is after 15 years, the new startup, Map My Genome, that I'm working on now, which is more consumer-facing business, I think we needed people, obviously, who are molecular biologists. We needed people who were statisticians and various other people. The numbers were higher, but it was still difficult to get it. And we found this in people who had the background, who had postdocs in genetics, but were doing completely things that were not to their calling. And we got a lot of people who we were able to attract, who had done something, who had worked in the US, came back to India, but they were doing jobs that were not relevant to what they were doing. We also found a lot of entrepreneurs who came back and they work with us. So I think that's how we are trying to solve our problem. And the third thing we have done is to work with a medical university to be able to say, how do we get something that we would need in terms of scaling up of counselors and things like that.
Our experience has been different from Anu's. At Seclor, attempts to relocate people from US and back to India, we found we were dealing with very, very small sample sets to pick out of. So we were looking for somebody who was willing to relocate to India, who was looking around for that specific profile that we wanted and so on. At least in our case, we couldn't find a big enough sample set to pick out of. So our solution to the problem was twofold. One is that we got people here in the US, and we set up internal processes by which they could collaborate with the India folks very, very smoothly. Right, so our solution to the problem was not relocation, but to just set up internal processes, including HR, team collaboration processes, and so on, become very complex when you're looking at time zone differences, sometimes language and accent differences, and so on. But I think over there we were very successful. And the other one is very similar. We just grew talent instead of lateral hires. So we almost over-invested in fresh out of college graduates. We knew that this was the profile of people who were, most mobile in terms of, job changes and so on, and making sure that their path from a college life to working for a company was very smooth and it was not drastic and so on. So we did a lot of good stuff over there.
All right. And folks, just a quick reminder, so please use the app if you want to submit questions, and we'll be running through those in a bit. So moving beyond a product, selling whatever it is that you're building. I know at least some of you have had direct experience in selling in multiple markets. Have you been able to see advantages of selling a global product based out of India?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I think there are quite a few advantages of selling from India. One is that you can afford to make a lot of mistakes cheap and iterate really quickly, right? So the whole process of product design, validation with a couple of customers. In our case, for Seclor, it's an information security product where we need to, where the people that we need to go to for validation of a certain product or a feature and so on is a very small sample set, right? We're talking about information security officers within an enterprise. So iteration of a product, validation from the market, changing it, reflecting the new changes, going back and so on, that whole process, if the product is not where you're sitting in a lab and thinking of something new and then building it and then launching it without informing anybody, if it's slightly more collaborative innovation that is there in the genes of the company, then India is a great place to do business. Right? So that's one.
And the lack of sort of physical one-on-ones with that early customer base is not a big hindrance.
It is a challenge, and therefore the complete team, in our experience, cannot be based in India. Okay. You need people to be based in the market, but the large part of the engineering, pre-sales, and so on, that can be based in India. So you can't be completely removed, but the bulk of the work can be done in India. I think that's one iteration. Iteration in the early stages of the product development life cycle, and that's something which is ongoing, right? Every cycle you want to iterate once or twice before you go to the market. So I think that's one big advantage of being in India. Mm-hmm.
I think for us, I think it has worked well by getting somebody who's selling, the salesperson being close to when we were selling from Ossimum, our market was mainly in the US and Europe. So we would get the front-facing, the salesperson from US, but the rest of the team, the technical team, the person who did the demo and the person who did the inside sales, the person who did all of the information gathering and all of that always happened to be out of India. And I think that works very well for two reasons. I think one, Vishal also mentioned this, but one of the stories that at least that I have from very early days was we were trying to pitch to a large, to Dow AgroSciences, one of our early customers. And we went there with the pitch saying that we would do this at 1/3 of the cost at 1/3 of the time. And the way we were able to do this was that we were able to demonstrate what we were trying to show them by being able to work at night and be able to show them in the morning. And most of it was done by being able to create these rapid prototypes and be able to then show these things back to the customer. And similarly, we would always have one really deep domain expert who would come from India to be able to do these demos or do it over the web. And I think that was always a good thing. But to maintain the relationships, it's always necessary to have somebody who's local, understands the natural nuances in terms of how to sell these products. Now we are selling more a consumer product, so it is a slightly different thing. I think there is, our market is India, so clearly I think that is a completely different approach because we are selling to India from.
You're now specializing on continent number 3.
Which was
you've done US, you've done Europe, and now you're learning the ropes. Anything from the Inbovi perspective?
So for Inbovi, what we have done, it's very similar to Vishal's approach. We have built a product, very proud, with lot of pride in India, but we sell into multiple markets. So Inbovi today has got offices in 17 countries with our own sales force. We think globally, but operate locally against the second principle, which means that my Australia office will be all Australian, my China office is all folks from China. So we take a lot of effort in making sure that we hire the best talent in those markets from that countries itself. But it does bring an important component of this whole fabric of connecting everyone with a common thread. And in the beginning, there was Yeah, we used to call that, yes, InMobi has a culture, but it basically primarily remained in India, in Bangalore. And before we realized that, oh my God, we have so many offices where, yes, teams are very passionate, they are aligned with the larger vision, but there were a few things which we found missing. And then we basically made a lot of conscious efforts in making sure that they're also basically knowing, understanding of a culture to bind these forces. In fact, one of the reasons I moved here in the US, people ask me, hey, what do you do? Yeah, I do sales, no problem, but a large portion of my work actually is to build a team and get them culturally aligned with the rest of the organization. And that is very, very important for us.
All right. I'm actually going to pick up one of the questions that came in since it's related, and Vishal, maybe you can take a stab at this. But how hard is it for Indian startups to sell to enterprises in India?
Pretty hard, I would say. I think you start off from a position of disadvantage by default. It's not like in any other, it's a very strange phenomena over there, which is a lot of times by default, the Indian product starts off it's assumed that the Indian product will be less expensive, right? It'll be lower quality, and it'll be something which, if we can't afford the main thing, then we'll go back to that other thing, right? So it's a very strange phenomena, and it's almost when selling to at least the Indian enterprise, and in our case, all our experience has been in B2B sales. Right? So that we have to, that perception we have to break very, very early on in the communications, marketing, and in the sales process. So in our case, I mean, just to give you an example, at Seclor, we position our product as an extremely premium product, right? So our price is almost 9 to 10 times of the next in line product, and that comes as a big surprise. And the person on the other side almost sits up and takes notice. How is this even possible? How are these guys even sending me a proposal for 10 times the price, where this other product from, in our case, we compete with companies like Microsoft very regularly, when the Microsoft product is just 1/10. And that curiosity a lot of times gets them to make a call to us, say, what are you guys up to, you know?
What are you drinking out there?
Yeah, so I think that's one thing. But to be fair, I think a lot of the elements of product design, and I think Amit, you mentioned this user experience centeredness and so on. Those skills, importance of that in a product design process and so on. That skill is still largely missing in India, right? Unless you're hiring from US and relocating and so on. And that comes finally in the final product is reflective of that. So in some sense, highly functional but less usable products, right, get the same kind of treatment that they will get here, right? Even if you've got a great functionally good product, but it sucks in user experience, then you start off in a position of disadvantage.
All right. Ashish, sort of switching to the investment side of things, right? And you've done this now in both geographies. I mean, how do you see the VC perspective in India being sort of different from here?
So I think a lot of fundamental differences, probably starting out with the fact that that is largely a market that is growing from a very small absolute value with a large growth rate. So looking for large existing markets in India is mostly a waste of time. One has to look for markets that can become large. So for example, if you look at what Amit built, the time that you all started doing mobile advertising, I remember companies like NGPay, we were having to do customer support to get people to start using their data plans because the telcos didn't know how to get people onto their own data plans. But that was the time that you all put a bet on the ground, which paid off handsomely. So most businesses look like that. They're a lot more future looking than going after a large existing market and solving that in a slightly different manner. That is one. Several of the other businesses are a lot more utilitarian. And we keep using this analogy again and again that people copy stuff that is happening here, there. I have trouble with that analogy because at a very naive level, that answer is absolutely yes. But that is because people eat food here and people eat food there also. So there are only so many different things you can do. The companies are completely different. It is just that we are solving those same problems, but we're just solving them later on because one needs the solution and the solution doesn't exist. We are several decades behind the US from a technology adoption perspective. So the same problems are being solved. But getting confused whether the companies are similar or knockoffs or so on and so forth is liable to lead to a dead company very soon because one really has to suspend all copying processes in order to be able to get anything to work. It's a different place altogether. So that's the other thing that I find, that the problems are of yesterday, but the solutions are of today, so to speak. Whereas here, a lot of the VCs are looking at problems of tomorrow. So what you are betting on or where the risk is slightly different. And last but not least is there are no repeat entrepreneurs. So here you will find a religious divide between VCs who often will only back repeat entrepreneurs, especially in mature spaces. Okay, you didn't give, I never got to talk to you. So please treat no as -1. No, I'm kidding you, but please treat it directionally. You can't build a practice on repeat entrepreneurs. Whereas here, if you're going after the semiconductor industry or the networking industry, you won't back a 22-year-old kid who's coming out of pick your favorite university. Whereas in India, it is majority are first-time entrepreneurs who are solving first-time problems. And that changes the game also. So those are some that come to mind.
So Anu, as the repeat entrepreneur here, you've now spoken to investors who've operated here, and you've spoken to Indian investors. Do you see differences? And there's no Indian investors here, so be honest.
So I won't use the names of the
You want to introduce yourself, right?
I know.
Let's do a quick Dinesh introduction, and maybe Ashish, you want to do that again.
So I clearly, there have been differences, but I'll talk about this one experience because I think that was very interesting. So this is the same company who has a fund based out of India and has a global fund, right? So I talked to the one in India, and what they looked at was, they told me to give spreadsheets. This is for my previous company, not for MapMyGeno. For MapMyGeno, we haven't yet gotten to that stage. So we went, then they said, give me all your Q1, Q2, Q3. You show this quarter-on-quarter analysis for the next few years. Tell me when you're going to make so much money, blah, blah, blah. And we were already a revenue-making company. We were, I think already at, I don't remember, 10, 15 million or something like that. Right? So I was deeply analyzed on the numbers and on the Excel spreadsheet. The same fund, I went to talk to the partner in New York or somewhere like that. This guy looks at it and says, wow, you guys are doing great. You have revenue also? I mean, and I think that was the difference, right? Because it was the exact same company, the exact same, me, but I got completely different responses in terms of what was more valuable in one place versus the other.
Now the Indian VCs don't worry about revenue.
That is a good thing now because obviously I think the Snapdeals and the Flipkarts have changed that. It's about how much you can burn. No.
One quick question from the audience. What can be done in collaboration with colleges to develop these talent gaps that we spoke about? Anybody want to take
Yeah. So you mean colleges? I don't know. Was the meaning colleges in India or
Colleges in India, can they play a role?
I think most of the education that happens, and we do a lot of the fresh out of college engineers and fresh out of college business school graduate hiring. I think a lot of the learning has to be done outside or post that college. And that's why, I mean, even if you look at companies like Infosys and TCS, they've had to set up their own universities, right? And you graduate and then you go and work or learn in the TCS university or the Infosys university. I think that's in Mysore or OT or somewhere, right? And then you actually become employable after the Infosys university and not after the actual college that you went to and so on. So I think working with colleges, we've given it actually 2 shots across 2 companies, and we've not found it to be very useful. Except for a few, in some cases, IITs who are ready to change around or add stuff to their curriculum which kind of gears people to become more employable. I think the solution, at least our solution to the problem, has been to just budget for the first 6 months of the person to be training. Right? And yeah, so that's been our solution. I don't know, has anybody done a lot of graduate hiring?
So we do hire.
Go ahead.
So we do hire freshers from various engineering schools and also go to IIMs and ISBs. But I think answer what probably Dinesh is, as one of you is asking, can we collaborate with different colleges to bridge this talent gap? Honestly speaking, even we are 1,000 member company, but still our needs are not too high for us to do a full-fledged collaboration with different universities. Having said that, we have basically made an attempt with IIT Kanpur. I actually can see Professor Dheeraj Sanghi, who was our point of contact, to groom data sciences. So data sciences, as you know, is one of the interesting fields where there's a lot of talent crunch, and our business actually relies on the understanding of whatever this user is going to do at what time. And not only our business, but even Anu's business or everyone, basically we are getting into a data explosion phase. And for you to create value, you have to understand that beast. And that's where the data sciences comes into picture. And we believe there's a serious crunch of that talent in the country. So again, journey has started, but I won't claim that we have done enough.
So one popular theme around the room is people who've been sitting on the fence, but now very seriously contemplating going back to India. And obviously the entrepreneurial pull is a big one, especially in this audience. So maybe we'll just go through, but any quick words of advice for people who might be contemplating that move?
I think the first 3 months of any new country are probably the worst. So do that before you make the final choice. I relocated to the US a couple of months ago, and I think the first 3 months of anything, getting a license to getting a house to figuring out kids' education and so on, is always the worst thing on the personal side. So do that. Maybe do a little experiment if you can figure out some way of doing that before you make the actual jump. The second thing here is that a lot of the experience and learning has to be kept aside when you go to India, right? Even though a lot of us have grown up in India, come here, we're working here and so on, and now we are looking to go back. Going back to Ashish's point, the country is changing every year, so it's not the same country that you left, right? So don't even keep that as a reference when you try and go back. I think that's my view. Anu?
I think it is a good time to go back, but half of the complaints I hear from people who move back to India are not so much about building the company; it's all everything else. And I think that's something people have to be comfortable with in dealing with, whether it is the housemaids and all of that, versus the actual the fun of actually building that company. But even then, I think you should be very sure about, if you're going there for what purpose. Is that, is there a purpose to be able to sell in India? Is the purpose to be able to build a team in software development team in India or otherwise? I think the purposes can be very different. And if, going there for, let's say, drug discovery might not be such a great idea. But going there to, build a different kind of product might be a good idea because of the lack of talent in certain kinds of areas in there.
I speak from a moral low ground. So I've moved thrice, which is why.
So you're the expert on the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll completely reiterate the point that Vishal was making, especially those of us who are born in India fool ourselves into believing that we actually know India. So we are more dangerous than a white person who's not delusional about what they know. So please go in there like an empty ghada, and then there is a much better chance of being filled with something more interesting. So that empty ghada being empty pot, sorry. That is one. I think I'll tell you one of the things that I do regularly. Whenever anybody calls from here saying that I want to move to India, I request them to come between the months of February to May or August, September, October. None of the vacation months. Come by themselves, no family. Otherwise, India 101 is a full-time job. And 95% of the people who call never turn up. So educating people on the virtues of going back to India is largely a waste of time for those people who are already in India, because most of it is a university exercise rather than a recruiting exercise. So I'm very much in in Vishal's camp. And if you flip it around and ask it of yourself, first check with your spouse. The single biggest reason people don't turn up is they never spoke to their spouse. And then when they the other part is, I would say, budget 1 year to come to terms with what India is about. And during that 1 year, please suspend all judgment. Yes, traffic sucks. Yes, the air is not clean. Yes, maids are hard to manage. You don't need to go to India to find that out. So give yourself a year to settle down, and then you will find that if you're not giving yourself a report card all along, it might turn out to be much prettier than all these intermediate checkpoints. So 1 year, just keep completely suspended, and it has its own virtues and its own vices. So,
You still came back.
and I might still go back. Okay.
Yeah, it's like quitting smoking thrice a day, right?
So at least I will add on to Ashish and Anu's point, and certainly I have lived enough in India, so can talk about living in India, being in India. So first of all, I believe actually everyone in this room is very, very accomplished. US has way too many opportunities to give, and most of you are doing, I believe, very, very well. Having said that, there's always, some itch in ourselves that, hey, I want to contribute back to my country. And I believe you have that itch, and that itch is strong enough. To Ashish's point, that you're not bothered with traffic, electricity cut, and maybe the quality of air. You should actually go. And this is a time right now where things are happening or needs to be done. Ashish mentioned about, you cannot just do a copy paste of whatever is happening in the US, in India. That won't work. Absolutely will not work. You can apply those fundamentals of businesses, those pain points in the context of India. And trust me, if you are building something for India, you are better off being in India. And I also believe that probably people in this room who have seen how US was built, more importantly, the digital part of the US was built, and you guys contributed here. Now it's time for India, where there is a backbone of internet and bunch of things are happening. You can go there by understanding of being Indian, lived in India, apply those first principles and solve for India problem. And in this process, you are actually helping in the national building, and also most likely going to create a lot of wealth for yourself, which was, by the way, not the case 5 years, 10 years ago, where you are going there to do something good, but the goodness was not coming back to you. I bet right now, if you solve for some problem, the wealth actually will happen to you for sure. So there's a pain in initial setting up this whole thing, but I believe a huge probability of you getting reward as well. So at least I am on a camp which is more positive. But to Ashish's point, you need to be sure that you are doing it for a right reason.
I think one on the ground advice is, if you are relocating, especially from US to India, make sure you live close to the place you work. India is a different country if you don't spend time commuting. Right? That's the one advice that I can definitely give.
Just quickly to wrap it up, your favorite sort of anecdote about entrepreneurship in India?
So I travel a lot, and one of my favorite quotes is from HSBC, which says that in future there will be no country waiting to be emerged, which means that everything will be emerged. And and imagine India, 1.2 billion people, more than 600-700 million smartphone users using internet, middle class growing, economy stable, growing, stable government. This is a time for India. Go for it.
So given that you all have heard about all the e-commerce companies all day long, I'll pick one from there. So Jeff Bezos had never heard of two terms, and never again in the diluted form, as no repeat entrepreneurs I know, of two terms that the Indian industry has created. One is gross merchandise value, because we lose money on every packet. We have come up with our own metric called gross merchandise value. And the other is cash on delivery. So it is a testament to solving the credit card problem by basically saying we will take your cash when you turn up at the door. And even to a company like Amazon, we could take a few lessons by starting out an e-commerce venture.
Okay, so I'll just tell one from yesterday. So when I was coming here, since I have a startup and we sell consumer genomics kits, I came with about 50, 60 kits, and I was thinking we'll have a stall, and ultimately it didn't work out that way. So I sent out an email to my board member I said, you must be having lots of friends, and help me sell these 50 tests that I have. And Pat came the reply saying, if you want a stall, why don't you just take the one I have? Right? So then you get a jugaad, you get it one up. So I have one right here. So please do come by and help me get those out. So buy the genome patris.
All right, so we had, a couple of years ago, we had sold to a German company in India, and they were already using our technology. And now the German parent wanted to use Seclore's technology. And we were coordinating with the German parent IT organization, and those guys don't know English and we didn't know German, right? And the Indian guys also didn't know German. So when they wrote to us an email, right, we would take that email, put it in Google Translate, read it, write our response, put it back into Google Translate, take the German, put it back into email and send it, right? And we did that for like a month, and imagine doing that with very, very highly technical. They had architecture questions. How will this system work? Will that system, and and so on. At some point of time, they introduced one of their colleagues, and as it happens, that person's name actually had a meaning, right? So it was not like a proper noun. It was a meaning, and that meaning was not very good, as you might imagine, right? And we didn't know this. And of course, when you're writing out an email, right, you know at the front of the email, you make sure you say the name of the person. But if that guy's name is somewhere in the email, you'll not check for that, right? So we take that email, we translate that, and we say, okay, this is abusive language. I mean, what are these guys saying? So he said, okay, maybe this is German, right? So who knows, right? And now we write our email, properly, not abusive at all, right? And we write that back. And then when it translates back into German, his name is misspelled, or we give it a completely different name. And over there, those guys are getting offended. So we have like a week of both the sides of the discussion getting offended about what are these other guys saying. And then thankfully somebody pointed out the mistake and explained it to both the sides. So those are the vagaries of doing business in India. Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks a lot. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks, Hemant, Suresh, a bunch of volunteers who've really helped make this possible. Right.